News Channel 5 Network. This is Sportsline.
Everybody, Jon Burton with you here on News Channel 5 Plus. Great to be with you for the Wednesday extravaganza. Hope you're having a great night and a great week. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to be talking with Adam Vingan, who covers the Predators for the Tennessean, and we'll talk a little Preds hockey. Preds with a 2-1 shootout win over the Minnesota Wild last night at Bridgestone Arena as they wrap up home ice advantage through the first round of the playoffs. Obviously, they're hoping for more. They're hoping to lock up that number one seed and have home ice throughout the playoffs. They still have 6 games left, including a game tomorrow night. But the Preds obviously in good shape. We'll talk to Adam in just a couple of minutes about that. But we start with this. We're going to talk a little football. Later in the show, by the way, we're going to have Tennessee State head coach Rod Reed on with us to talk a little spring football. But there's been a lot of activity on Twitter the last few days, and it involves the Giants and what they're going to do with their wide receiver, Odell Beckham Jr. Saw a lot of people on Twitter saying, come on, Titans, trade for this guy. If you don't know, Odell Beckham Jr. is depending on who you talk to, perhaps on the trade block with the New York Giants. He's had some issues on and off the field as a member of the Giants. He's in the final year of his contract, scheduled to make about $8 million this year. And he wants to be the highest paid player in the National Football League next year. He wants a huge contract. So the Giants basically are saying they're not shopping Odell Beckham Jr., but if a crazy offer came along, they would certainly entertain it. The report came out today that they're asking for 2 number 1s, 2 number 1 draft picks, or 2 first-round draft picks, I should say, to start for Odell Beckham Jr. So we're going to ask you Titans fans tonight, and I know you're out there. You can give us a call. A, do you want Odell Beckham Jr.? And B, what would you be willing to give up to trade for him? So while you ponder that, we're going to check in as I reach for the phone here. While you ponder that, we're going to check in with our good buddy Adam Vingan from the Tennessean, who covers the Nashville Predators. Adam, good evening. How are you, buddy?
Good, JB. How are you?
Good, man. You've been bugging me for the last several weeks to get on the show, so we finally got you on. I'm kidding, of course. Thank you so much for being on, my man.
Always a pleasure.
Adam, interesting goings-on with the Predators. Obviously, they're sitting in a really good spot. They get the win, the shootout win over Minnesota last night. They lock up home ice in the first round of the playoffs. Obviously, they have a lot to play for, 6 games left. And we were talking about this today at practice, were we not? You know, the Predators they can't afford to ease off the gas pedal because, you know, despite the fact that the Preds have had good success against them during the regular season, the Winnipeg Jets are not going away.
No, they're only 5 points behind the Predators with 6 games left. Each team has 6 games left. And what we were talking about, JB, are the teams' respective remaining schedules. The Predators play 4 of their 6 games, including tomorrow night against the San Jose Sharks, against teams in playoff position. And there's a 5th team, the Florida Panthers, who are in 9th place in the Eastern Conference fighting for a playoff spot, even though they're currently losing to the Toronto Maple Leafs as we speak. But they're still very much in the Eastern Conference race. The only team that they're playing that's out of it are the Buffalo Sabres at home on Saturday. Meanwhile, 5 of the Jets' remaining 6 games are against teams that have been eliminated from playoff contention. So the Predators have a much harder schedule down the stretch than the Jets do. And a lot of times teams in the Predators' position in previous seasons don't really have anything to play for at this point. But as you mentioned, the only 2 things that they've clinched so far are a playoff spot and first-round home ice advantage. If they want to get home ice advantage through 2 rounds, they have to win the Central Division. If they want to get it through 3 rounds, they have to win the Western Conference. They have to hold off the Jets as well as the Vegas Golden Knights, who are only 1 point behind the Jets in the race in the Western Conference. And then, of course, to win the President's Trophy, to the team with the best regular season record, they would get home ice advantage throughout the entire Stanley Cup playoffs. They're 3 points ahead of the Tampa Bay Lightning, who they play in Tampa on Sunday. So a lot for them still left to play for. A lot for them still left to play for, and a lot of kinks that they want to work out of their game before the playoffs start April 11th. But a good step in the right direction for them against the Minnesota Wild, sort of a return to form for them in many ways. Still some problem areas. Their power play this month has been nearly non-existent. But otherwise, a good game from them last night.
Adam, if I'm Peter Laviolette, the head coach, I got to kind of be happy in the back of my mind that this team, my team, still has a lot to play for. Chances are he's going to get the best from this team, at least effort-wise, these last 6 games of the regular season.
Yes, because if the Predators, think about Chicago last year. Around this time last year, the Blackhawks had wrapped up the #1 seed in the Western Conference. They had wrapped up the Central Division. I don't know exactly how many games they had left in the schedule at that time, but there was probably at least a week, if not more, where the Blackhawks really had nothing to do. They were just sort of waiting for the schedule to end, and you saw how that turned out for them. Now, I'm not saying that the Predators in the same position would have the same results as to what they did to Chicago last year, but I think it's helped if you're still playing important games down the stretch, because it keeps you in that playoff mentality and that playoff mindset. And that's what players were talking about today while we were at practice, was the fact that it is hard, as Ryan Johansson said, not to look ahead to the postseason, but there are still 6 games left. There are still things they can do. There are still things they can earn. And that should, theoretically, keep them on the top of their game when the playoffs do start.
Adam Vingan is our guest. He covers the Nashville Predators for the Tennessean. You can follow him on Twitter at Adam Vingan. Adam, also speaking today was Mike Fisher. We're going to hear from him a little bit later in the show, time permitting. What have you seen from him since he's returned out of retirement?
Well, I think you wouldn't really be able to tell that he had been retired for nearly a year when he came back. I know that they've been monitoring him, particularly when it comes to back-to-back games. He hasn't played in both halves of a back-to-back yet this season, and they have one more left Saturday against Buffalo and Sunday at Tampa. So expect for him not to play in at least one of those games, barring the availability of other players. But I think he's played the role that he should have been playing when he came back, as well as the role he was accustomed to playing before he retired. More of a defensive specialist, penalty kill, defensive zone face-off, things of that nature. I think they've handled it right. They've limited his even strength ice time and his overall ice time. They haven't needed him to play those high-end minutes because they have Kyle Turris and Nick Bonino, who they didn't have at this time last year. So I think I've been impressed. For a player who, I remember him telling me that the only organized hockey he played after he retired was in an alumni game for the Ottawa Senators in December. Certainly looks like a player who really hasn't missed a beat.
Another player that hasn't missed a beat, having another spectacular season like he did last year, is Victor Arvidsson. When you talk about the Preds, obviously PK Subban's the rock star, Fisher's the matinee idol with the glamorous wife, and Pekarine's the superstar goaltender, MVP candidate. But man, this kid RV Hustle is having another spectacular season. As good as he was last year, do you think he's even better this year based on what you've seen?
I think it's more impressive what he's done this year, because you could certainly look at what he did last year, and if you weren't familiar with Victor Arvidsson, you could think that he had one good season and he cashed in on a large contract because of it. He's close to tying his career high from last year at 61 points. I think he's at 58 or 59, and certainly could surpass it by the end of the season. I mean, he regularly is the Predators' most consistent player, in the sense that you know what you're going to get from him every game. And you mentioned it; he's tenacious. He is not afraid to get to the areas of the ice where he's going to be put in harm's way. For a player of his size, he's not big. He does not mind getting to the front of the net and battling along the boards. I remember last year thinking that more often than not, he ends up on his butt than he does on his skates because he's playing so hard, but that's exactly why. He knows where to go, and he's very reliable on the power play, on the penalty kill, and on even strength. He makes his line mates better. Certainly an unsung hero in a lot of ways for Nashville.
Talking with Adam Vingan of the Tennessean, who covers the Nashville Predators, frequent guest on our show. Happy to have him here. Follow him on Twitter at Adam Vingan. Adam, when you look at the West, we know about Winnipeg, obviously. We know about the Vegas Golden Knights, maybe the best, expansion season in the history of pro sports, depending on how things shake out. When you look at the West as it pertains to the Predators, who do you think is the biggest threat to keep the Preds from going back to the Stanley Cup final?
My personal opinion on this has always been this. If the Predators and Winnipeg Jets meet in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs as projected, the winner of that series will represent the West in the Stanley Cup final. I don't want to discount people on the Pacific side of the bracket, Vegas, LA, San Jose, Anaheim, but I don't think those teams are as good as the Predators and the Jets. I really do think Winnipeg is the biggest obstacle preventing Nashville from getting back to the Stanley Cup final. I mean, every single game that those two teams have played this season, they played 5 games, non-shootout goals excluded. Shootout goals excluded. Teams combined for 41 goals in 5 games. I think the game that they played on Sunday typified what this series has been like all season. Fast, physical, high-scoring, nasty, contentious, whatever you want to use. I mean, those two teams are, I think, the best two teams in the Western Conference, and I certainly think each team could win the Stanley Cup. So I certainly believe that if the Predators are able to if the Predators advance to the second round, if the Jets were to meet them there and they were to beat the Jets, I think they would be all clear to get back to the Cup final.
Adam, we mentioned Pekka Rinne a little bit earlier, having an MVP caliber season. Is this the year maybe that he walks away with some significant hardware? If you base on what he's done in the regular season?
I think he should win the Vezina. I don't think it should be. I don't think there should really be an argument. I mean, there are other goalies that have had great seasons: Andrei Vasilevsky in Tampa, Connor Hellebuyck in Winnipeg, Sergei Bobrovsky in Columbus. The list goes on, but Pekka, I think what's most impressive, not just about his season, and you can use any traditional or advanced statistic to make your case. It's the fact that he's done this at 35 years old.
Right.
Most goalies, those who are more statistically inclined than I am, will say that at this stage of a goalie's career, he should be regressing. He should be on the decline of his career. I know that a lot of people saw what Pekka did during the Stanley Cup playoffs last year, the games in Pittsburgh notwithstanding, and thought it was a fluke. I think he's proved this season that that's not the case, but he's still a very high-quality goaltender. So I certainly think that he should win the Vezina. As for the MVP, for the Hart Trophy, I certainly think he should probably get some votes, maybe some lower-end votes, 4th place, 5th place votes. So I'm not convinced that he's going to win the MVP, really be in the conversation, just because, one, goalies typically don't win MVP, even though it's happened as recently as 3 years ago when Carey Price won the Hart Trophy in Montreal. But the way I look at it is, as good as Pekka has been this season, and how many points he's probably contributed to the team just based on how he's played, he's not making a bad team great. He's making a good team better. I think that's what's going to work against him. The Predators are still a very good team, even without him, or if he was playing at league average levels. So I think that's probably what's going to work against him. But he probably should deserve some sort of consideration for it, maybe a couple of votes here and there. But I don't expect him to be in anyone's top 5 regularly.
All right, Adam, next week is our big WrestleMania preview spectacular show here on Sportsline, and I wanted to get your thoughts because I know you're a big pro wrestling and sports entertainment fan, as am I. What are your thoughts on how WWE is using Ronda Rousey right now? I'll give you my thoughts. I really thought they should have brought her in as a heel, kind of like Brock Lesnar, just beating everybody up and then make that slow babyface turn. But obviously, she's got a little bit of the crowd behind her. She's got the whole Stephanie McMahon thing coming up. What are your thoughts? What are your early thoughts on Ronda Rousey in the WWE?
I think part of her allure is the fact that she is, I'm not sure if I could say that she's a badass. She's a legitimate badass. There you go. So that certainly plays into her aura. I think an issue that probably plagued her at the beginning was that she's not the most engaging speaker.
No.
But
well said.
She has incredible facial expression, and you know that she can really hurt a human being because we've seen it. So I think there should be the strong but silent type thing that they should go with her. So if you need to give her a mouthpiece, that's fine. But I think just her kicking people's butt is all you really need. Similarly to Brock Lesnar, a UFC alum in his own right. But I certainly think that she has a passion for professional wrestling. She's talked about it before. You're seeing it now. The match at WrestleMania should be good. But yeah, I really do think that they have her in the right. I feel like they have her going in the right direction. Mm-hmm. The less she talks, the better. I think just the way that she stares down people should be enough to get her point across.
And last question. I think there's some really good matches on the card, but ho-hum, it's going to be Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar for the Universal title. Guys like Dave Meltzer, who covers, pro wrestling as a journalist, has been saying for the last 10 months that this was going to be the main event, and Roman Reigns is going to go over and beat Brock Lesnar for the championship. I mean, Vince is pretty stubborn when it comes to Roman Reigns. He feels like he's going to be the guy, and I don't see that match going any other way than Roman winning. Do you?
No, but I also wish, remember, if you go back to WrestleMania last year, he beats The Undertaker in the main event.
Right.
The following night on Raw, they start the show, and there's this Undertaker chant for about 5 consecutive minutes.
Right.
Then Roman Reigns walks to the ring, he's being booed mercifully. He's standing in the middle of the ring for like 10 minutes. He's trying to say something. And every time he lifts the microphone to his face,
right,
they just boo him. And then he finally just says, "It's my yard now," drops the mic and walks out. It was the greatest promo he's ever cut.
Yep.
I wish they would have just gone from there. But, I think that they want to pigeonhole him into this babyface position. That they're trying to build up sympathy from him in the last couple of weeks of him getting his butt kicked by Brock Lesnar.
Right.
He's not that guy. He's not a pure babyface like a Daniel Bryan who's coming back, for example.
Right.
Or people who watch NXT like a Johnny Gargano, or he should not be in that role, but for whatever reason they're trying to put him in there.
Interesting stuff, Adam. Always a pleasure having you on, my man. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
All right, JB. Thanks.
All right, that's the great Adam Vingan. You can read him in the Tennessean. You can follow him on Twitter at Adam Vingan. We are late for a break. Coming up, bottom of the hour, Tennessee State head football coach Rod Reed will join us, talk a little spring football. When we come back, more on the Preds and Titans fans. Do you want Odell Beckham Jr., and what are you willing to give up to get him? Stay with us. We're back after this.